Meet Fred Flarsky, a journalist who writes for the Brooklyn Advocate, and to cover a new story he has managed to get inside a white supremacist group. But right when Fred is getting a swastika tattoo to prove his loyalty, one of the men finds out that he's a Jew and he's been recording their conversations. In an act of panic, Fred decides to jump out of the jump, crashing on the pavement, but all Fred could care about is that he saved the recording. Later, Fred is watching the news. They talk about a woman named Charlotte Field, a Rhodes Scholar, a Pulitzer winner, and protege of President Chambers, who tapped Field 2 years ago to be the youngest Secretary of State in the history of the United States. Now we get to see what Charlotte's daily routine looks like. She arrives home very late, and even then she still needs to do some work calls. And finally, when she gets some time for herself to take a bath, she's so exhausted that she falls asleep on the floor. The next day we see her working out while answering some questions for an interview. After that, Charlotte visits the president, who tells her that he will not be seeking re-election because he wants to make it in the movies. And the president would like to endorse Charlotte to be the next president of the United States. Charlotte says she'd be honored. When Fred arrives at his job, he gets told that they were bought by Wembley Media. Fred thinks this is a disaster because the whole point of Brooklyn Advocate was to fight giant media conglomerates like the one that just bought them. Fred says that he quits, but his boss offers to fire him so he can get unemployment. But Fred, despite knowing that Wembley will never know that he quit, decides to do it to maintain his honor. Fred calls his best friend Lance to hang out. To raise Charlotte's popularity for her campaign, her team has decided that she should get together with the Canadian Prime Minister, James Stewart. Now at a party, James approaches Charlotte. He suggests they leave for a more private area, but Charlotte's attention is absorbed when she sees the group boys' 2 men performing. Lance has taken Fred to this very same party. James excuses himself to leave. Fred locks his eyes with Charlotte and tells Lance that he knows her. Lance of course doesn't believe that, so Fred explains that when he was 13 he had a babysitter and that was Charlotte and she was really nice to him. So Fred thought that there was some romantic chemistry between them which made him kiss her. Then Charlotte's boyfriend comes in and makes fun of how excited he got for the kiss. Charlotte's security tells Fred that she wants to speak to him. Charlotte is happy to see Fred. They both share the love for the group boys' 2 men. Suddenly they see Parker Wembley climbing up the stairs. Charlotte says he hates him, but when Parker greets her she pretends not to dislike him. After that, Charlotte excuses herself. Fred no longer wants to hold his hate towards Wembley Media, so he walks up to Parker to tell him that he's everything that's wrong with their country because his media conglomerate is ruining the planet. Security is about to escort Fred out, but he trips and rolls down the stairs. Charlotte takes an interest in reading what Fred did for the Journal and decides to schedule a meeting to ask Fred if he would like to write her speeches. Fred is not convinced to take the job because he doesn't fully believe that what he's going to write will be part of something that has a positive impact on society. Charlotte convinces him by saying that she's looking to save the planet. Fred begins to work for Charlotte and suggests he write about her memories from high school and how concerned she was with the environment from a young age. Charlotte and her crew fly to an event the president of Sweden is hosting. Charlotte is concerned about Fred's casual look, so Maggie, her assistant, offers to find formal attire for him. When Fred shows up, Charlotte can't hold her laughter because Maggie decided to dress him in a traditional Swedish costume. Later in the night, Maggie tells Fred that he needs to rewrite a part of the speech where he talks about the seas. But Fred refuses and runs to grab his laptop and throw it away because he will not have to compromise the integrity of his writing. Charlotte steps in and explains to Fred that until she runs the game, she has to play the game. But the discussion ends when they stare in awe at an aurora borealis. Charlotte gives the speech Fred wrote for her. The next day they talk about it on the news and everyone seems pleased with it. Fred keeps following Charlotte during the 20-country world tour, and in doing so he's each time learning something new about her, which helps him with the writing. Now in Manila, Fred asks Charlotte about her romantic life. Charlotte says that she's not dating anyone because of how complex it is, since most men won't date a woman who's more powerful than them. Fred seems not to mind that, but out of nowhere, an explosion happens and Fred hovers over Charlotte to protect her. Charlotte explains that insurgents are fighting the army. Charlotte's security comes into the room to get her to a safe place. Once they're safe, Fred and Charlotte get intimate. Then Charlotte notices Fred's tattoo, and he explains that he did some modifications to not have a swastika on his arm. Charlotte and Fred are now attending another event. When Charlotte is alone, James, the Prime Minister of Canada, approaches her. Charlotte asks him if she can add Canada to the list of countries taking part in her initiative. James says that only if she dances with him. Charlotte grants James the dance. When the dance finishes, Fred sends a message to Charlotte so the two of them can be alone for a little bit. The following morning, the president calls Charlotte to tell her that he read her environmental treaty and that he needs her to revise it. This is because he's funded by some rich people who don't care about the environment. Charlotte feels the pressure because unless the president endorses her, she won't win. Charlotte opens up to Fred to tell him that she doesn't want to do that job anymore because there's no point. Charlotte then says that she wants to get wild, so Fred takes her out to have fun at the club. They have so much fun, but at one point Charlotte's security brings her back to reality, telling her that there's a situation. One of their U-2s went down while performing a standard flyover in Kashgari airspace. The pilot was able to eject, but it appears he was taken by the Kashgari military. And Prime Minister Bharat is refusing to return the pilot to United States custody. So it is up to Charlotte to sort things out. The only problem seems to be that she's not sober, but this actually helps her to try a more chill approach with Bharat, who agrees to set the pilot free. And this of course grants Charlotte so much popularity amongst the US citizens. But during that moment of ecstasy, Charlotte gets carried away in television when she mentions that the president 100% supports her treaty. The next day, the president asks Charlotte to meet up with him. But when she arrives, Parker Wembley shows up to be part of the conversation. Parker doesn't hesitate to explain that they have a number of business interests and those may be gravely affected by her agreement. And essentially what they are trying to build in Alaska is sitting on a bunch of land that will be protected by Charlotte's initiative. Charlotte's solution for this is that they move their project elsewhere. Parker is unwilling to do that, so he tells Charlotte that she must do as he says or else he'll release a video he got by hacking Fred's laptop. This video could ruin Charlotte's popularity because it shows Fred calling her so they can get intimate. Charlotte meets with Fred to tell him that she took the deal so that they wouldn't release the video. But Fred doesn't feel right about this because to him the treaty was more important than the treaty. To Charlotte, in order to achieve things she has to compromise. Fred asks what will happen to them. Charlotte tells Fred that her team can make him an image he can present to the public. But this process could take a few months, so Fred believes that in that time she could find that it's not a good moment to introduce her boyfriend, so he tells Charlotte that he can't do it. Charlotte goes out to have dinner with James, but Charlotte doesn't really hit it off with him. Later, Fred sends a voicemail to Charlotte to tell her that he will do anything to be with her. The next day, during a speech, Charlotte says that they're going to release a video of a guy she dated and asks the people not to shame them because she likes him. Fred, who was watching the speech with Lance, runs to go see Charlotte. When they see each other, Charlotte tells Fred she loves him and they kiss. Charlotte then publicly introduces Fred as her boyfriend. The people seem thrilled with the announcement. A few months later, Charlotte wins the election, making her the President of the United States and making Fred the first Mr. of the United States.